There is a strange invisible line that sits at $20,000, and the day you cross it, something happens that almost no one ever warns you about. If you have been with me since the beginning, you remember I told you that everything changes the day you save your first 10,000. And it does. But I did not tell you the whole truth that day because you were not ready for it yet. The whole truth is this. $10,000 changes how you feel. $20,000 changes what is actually possible. The first 10 was about ending the fear. The second 10 is about starting the momentum. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a person who has stopped sinking and a person who has finally quietly begun to rise. Let me show you exactly what changes, because it is more than you think, and it happens faster than you would believe. My name is Daiki. I am 28 years old. And the jump from your first 10,000 to your first 20,000 was in the house I grew up in, considered the single most important stretch of road in a person's entire financial life. Not because of the money itself, because of what the money quietly does to you along the way. If this channel has walked with you this far, subscribe and stay close, because this is the video where saving stops being a struggle and starts becoming a force. Let me explain. Let me remind you where we were. At $10,000, I told you 5 things changed. You stopped paying the poor tax. The emergency stopped being an emergency. You could finally see compounding begin. You gained the power to say no. And most of all, you became at last a person who saves. That was the end of the sinking. That was the day the water stopped rising over your head. But here's what I did not say. At 10,000, you are treading water. You are safe, you are no longer drowning, but you are still holding yourself in place with effort. 20,000 is the day your feet finally touch something solid, and you realize you can stop treading, and stand, and for the first time, look up at where you might actually go. So let me count what changes when your feet touch the ground. The first thing that changes is that the fear does not just quiet down, it goes silent. Completely. At 10,000, the loud panic was gone, but there was still a hum underneath everything. A low background worry that never fully switched off. What if the emergency is bigger than I think? What if it happens twice? At 20,000, that hum finally stops. You have not just a cushion now, but a real deep buffer. Enough to absorb not one disaster, but a whole bad season of them. And something changes in your body when that happens. You sleep differently. You breathe differently. You walk into work differently because for the first time, they need you more than you need them. And everyone in the room can feel it, even if no one can name it. The silence where the fear used to live is the first gift of 20,000, and it is worth more than the money itself. And do not underestimate what that silence does to the rest of your life, because fear is expensive in ways that never show up on any bank statement. Fear makes you snap at the people you love over nothing. Fear makes you stay small, take the safe and soul-deadening path, keep your head down in the exact moment you should speak. A person living in constant, quiet money fear is not fully themselves, and most of the time they do not even know it, because they have never once known anything else. When that fear finally goes silent, somewhere in the second 10,000, people often report that they became, quite simply, easier to be around, kinder, more patient, more themselves. The money did not just buy a buffer against disaster. It quietly gave them back a piece of who they had always been, underneath all that worry. The second thing that changes is that compounding stops being a promise and becomes a paycheck. At $10,000, I showed you that your money had begun to earn a few $100s a year, enough to finally see. But 20,000 is roughly where something crosses over. The money your money earns starts to become a real number, a number you would have been grateful to find in your account on a hard month not long ago. Your savings are now quietly employing themselves. They go to work while you sleep, while you eat, while you live your life, and they come home with something to show for it. And the first time you realize that a meaningful chunk of your growth this year came not from your own hands, but from money you saved months ago doing its own quiet labor. Something shifts in you permanently. You stop seeing money as something you spend. You start seeing it as something you hire. Let me put a real number on it, so you feel the weight of what I mean. At a fair, historical rate, $20,000 set properly to work can quietly earn you somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000, perhaps $1,500, in a single year, doing absolutely nothing but existing. Now think back, honestly, to the version of you from the very first video, the one sitting 9 days from payday, staring at $312. To that person, $1,500 appearing out of thin air across a year would have been a small miracle. And now it is simply what your money does in the background, unasked, while you go on living your life. That is not a small thing. That is the first wage your money has ever paid you, and from here it only grows. The third thing that changes is the one that surprises everyone, and it is the most important, so listen carefully. Saving gets easier. Not harder, easier. I know that sounds backwards. Everyone assumes that the higher the number climbs, the harder each new dollar is to add. But the opposite is true, and here is why. Getting the first 10,000 is like pushing a heavy cart uphill from a dead stop. Every single dollar fights you, but somewhere in the second 10,000, the cart crests the hill, and the momentum flips, and now it begins gently to roll on its own. Your money is earning. Your habits are automatic. Your fear is gone, so you are no longer bleeding money on the poor tax and the panic purchases. And suddenly you look up and realize the 20,000 did not take twice as long as the 10. It came faster. The next 20 will come faster still. This is the moment, right here, where the whole thing stops being a struggle you are enduring and becomes a force that is carrying you, and once you feel that flip, you will never fear saving again. The fourth thing that changes is that your options multiply, and I do not mean small options. At 10,000, you gain the power to say no. At 20,000, you gain the power to say yes. Yes to the opportunity that requires a little capital and a little courage. Yes to leaving the job that was slowly killing you, because now you have the runway to land somewhere better. Yes to the small business idea, the tools of a trade, the leap you could never afford to take when every dollar was already spoken for. $20,000 is not enough to make you rich, but it is often exactly enough to let you make the one brave move that changes the entire direction of your life. The move that fear had kept locked away from you for years. The person with nothing saved cannot take chances. The person with 20,000 can finally choose one wisely on purpose. And a single well-chosen yes made from a place of safety instead of desperation can be worth more than the 20,000 many times over. I watched this happen with a man near where I grew up. For years, he stayed in a job that treated him poorly, not because he wanted to, but because he had nothing behind him. And a man with nothing behind him cannot afford to be brave. Then, quietly, over a few hard years, he built his 20,000 and one ordinary morning. He walked into that job and left it calmly, without drama, because at last he simply could. He took the small trade he had always loved and had never once been able to risk, and within a few years it earned him more than the old job ever had, and every bit of it was his own. That 20,000 did not make him rich. It did something far better. It bought him the single brave morning that changed the entire direction of his life. That is what this money is truly for, not to sit in an account and be admired, to fund the one courageous yes that fear had been hiding from you for years. If you have come this far with me, subscribe and stay to the end, because the last thing that changes is the deepest, and it is the reason my family cared about this stretch of road more than any other. Now let me finish the count. The fifth thing that changes is that you become permanently, undeniably, a different kind of person, and this time it cannot be taken back. At 10,000, I told you that you became a person who saves. But 10,000, if you are honest, could still have been a little luck, a good year, a tax refund that landed at the right time. 20,000 cannot be luck. 20,000 is proof. It is the second 10,000 built deliberately, on purpose, with the habits you now own, and it settles a question inside you that most people carry unanswered their entire lives. The question of whether you are at your core someone who can build. At 20,000, that question is answered forever with a yes you earned twice. And a person who knows, all the way down, that they can build wealth does not just save differently. They carry themselves differently. They make decisions from a place of quiet strength instead of fear. They stop being someone that money happens to and become someone who happens to money. That is the real prize of 20,000, not the number in the account. The person you had to become to put it there. And I want you to understand what this momentum truly means because it is the most hopeful thing I know about money. Most people believe that getting ahead is a matter of endless grinding willpower, that you must strain against the current every single day for the rest of your life, and that the moment you stop straining, you slide right back. And for the person with nothing saved, that is painfully, exhaustingly true. But it stops being true right here, in this exact stretch of road. Because the habits you built to reach 20,000 do not switch off when you look away. The automatic saving keeps saving. The compounding keeps compounding. The fear stays gone, so the money stays home instead of leaking out the bottom. You have, without quite realizing it, built yourself a small machine, and the machine now runs whether you are watching it or not. The straining is over. What replaces it is something most people never get to feel in their whole lives, the quiet, steady sensation of being carried forward by something you built, instead of dragging yourself forward by sheer force. That feeling is the real reward. And it begins, for real, right around $20,000. Now let me be straight with you, the way I always am. I am not telling you that $20,000 is wealth. It is not. Anyone who tells you it is rich money is still lying to you, exactly as they were at 10. And I am not telling you the road from here is easy or that nothing can go wrong. Life still comes for everyone, and a real emergency can still take a bite out of what you built, which is exactly why the buffer exists in the first place. 20,000 is not the destination. It is something better and more useful than a destination. It is escape velocity. It is the point where the pull of the old life, the paycheck to paycheck gravity that holds most people down for their whole lives, finally lets go of you, and you begin slowly at first and then not so slowly to climb. So here is what I want you to do this week. If you are not yet at your first 10,000, do not look at 20 and feel discouraged. Look at it and understand that the hardest part is the beginning, and that it gets easier, genuinely easier, the moment you crest that first hill. Keep going. And if you are somewhere between 10 and 20 right now, in the very hardest and most important stretch, I want you to do one thing. I want you to mark the exact number you are at today, write it down on the plain paper, and then simply keep feeding it every payday the way I've taught you, and watch what happens to the speed. Watch the cart begin to roll. Because you are closer to the flip than you think, and once you feel it, everything I have told you today stops being my words and becomes your own experience. That is how my grandfather did it, that is how my father did it, and it is still how it is done in any home that remembers. So tell me in the comments, where are you right now on this road, honestly? Still climbing to the first 10, in the hard stretch between 10 and 20, or standing, at last, on solid ground looking up? Wherever you are, say it and let us keep climbing together. I read every single one. And next time, I am going to show you the exact number, the real one, where your money finally begins to earn more in a year than you do, the day the machine you built starts to out-earn the hands that built it. It is closer than almost anyone believes, and the day you cross it, you are no longer working for money. It is, at last, working for you. I will see you then.